Working with multilingual writers, either international students or immigrant student populations, requires a lot of flexibility in your pedagogy, and as I mentioned earlier, slowing down and making your pedagogy really explicit. So there are a few strategies that I've seen really work with this particular or these particular student populations. And that is, as I mentioned earlier, defining key terms for our students, key terms that we think are really familiar but may not be, so even including a glossary on our assignment descriptions that define those terms, or making those terms really explicit and sort of breaking them down into smaller parts on our rubrics, grading rubrics. And of course, because the needs of multilingual writers are so individualized, conferencing with students actually as much as possible. So, you know, oftentimes as composition instructors, we do conference with our students at least once or twice, but as many times as possible, it would be most helpful to work with our students one-on-one as much as possible. So even building that time into the classroom where students are, you know, working on something else, and then the faculty member is meeting with a student, touching base with them one-on-one for 5 minutes. That's the kind of individualized attention that these populations need to help them navigate the expectations, the language differences, the terminology, the vocabulary. Also making another strategy or another sort of approach that's helpful is making it explicit, making our expectations explicit, where we're explaining how all of the different goals that we're trying to work towards in the course. So integrating those goals, like if you're in a writing in the disciplines course, for example, or a writing intensive course, helping students recognize that you're trying to develop subject matter knowledge as well as process knowledge, as well as rhetorical knowledge, as well as, if you don't have a language specialist with you, this would be difficult, but language knowledge, so formal knowledge. Helping students see that intersectional nature of those different domains of knowledge is what we're working on. So at times it might feel like we're focusing a lot on process, or we're focusing a lot on formal knowledge if we're working with a linguist, or we're focusing a lot on rhetorical knowledge. Oftentimes students might feel like they're anxious because they're not getting the subject matter knowledge that they need. But so it's important to sort of back up and explain to students that this is what we're looking for in this class, and this is what we're working towards. And it's the intersection of all of those things that's going to help you develop that kind of disciplinary knowledge.
So usually writing teachers are looking for the product, the writing to be the place where and students know this. In fact, one of our students just said yesterday, I feel like I write and then my professor reads my writing and judges my intellect and my comprehension. And so it's not lost on the students that this is how this is being done. So there's anxiety about making sure that what shows up on the page reflects what I know and what I want to say about the topic. But strategies that I have found faculty using that really help students feel confident when they turn in that product or that page would be a focus on the faculty's part on what we would say are like receptive skills that need to come before productive skills. So even in a writing classroom, there's probably going to be some amount of reading that students are doing before they're writing. There's probably going to be some listening to a lecture or to a class discussion that students need to bring in, fold into what they're about to write in response to the reading or the listening. And sometimes I think that we kind of don't see that. It's kind of a hidden part of a writing course, is the amount of listening and the amount of reading that students actually need to be able to do and engage in before they get to the writing, and then throughout the process of writing. So actually I was looking at someone's syllabus yesterday, and they had broken out the course calendar, like here's the topic, here's the calendar dates for these things, here are the reading assignments, and then here are the writing assignments. And the reading assignments were poems, new poems that every week, you know, you're going to read these 3 this week and these 3 this week. And then there were papers, and small papers, that were due in the final column. And I was thinking it would be interesting on that same calendar, under reading, to include the kind of reading that students are doing, like what kind of feedback they're getting from their faculty member in response to their writing from the week before, and then how that kind of reading is actually part of the reading of the course that will feed into the student's ability to write the next paper or revise the one that's been given. So I think we don't really focus enough on the kind of the variety and the amount of reading that which is receptive, taking it in, that students really need to be able to do in order to produce what we expect from them, whether it's on a revision or on an original draft of something. So I think that overall, and same thing with listening, I could say the same exact thing. If I'm going to deliver a lecture on this poet or on this time period or on this topic or some disciplinary area, how much help am I providing or strategies am I introducing to students so that they can really make best use of my time talking and their time listening to myself or to their peers, so that they can really use that to their best ability when it comes to actually writing.
So like a listening guide.
A listening guide, an outline, some previewing of vocabulary. These are some key terms that we're going to talk about today. Let's talk about them. They're going to come up in the conversation, or they're going to come up in the reading you're about to see. Really focusing on annotating. How do students really engage with the text before they start to write about that text? What are 10 strategies that you can share that you yourself use for annotating a text? And include, understanding new terms, new vocabulary, new phrases, sentence structures. And this type of, passive voice is being used a lot here. Let's just notice that. But what questions in terms of the content? What kind of intertextuality? How are the writers using other writers in order to build or come to terms or forward? Lots of frameworks that you could use that the students, would benefit from explicitly seeing too, especially if we're hoping that they use some of those structures and strategies for just content and the writing that they're going to do for us in our class. So I guess that would be like the biggest suggestion I would have, is like writing teachers who look at writing as one component of language that really builds on and depends on students' ability to read and listen and communicate before they get to the writing.